So I constantly get questions about what the most attractive traits are about the dismissive avoidant attachment style and why people tend to be drawn in so often to DAs as a whole. So in this video, I'm going to cover the 5 most commonly reported traits about what makes dismissive avoidance attractive. And I would love to hear what your thoughts are and what draws you into dismissive avoidance and what some of those patterns are in the comments below. So, first and foremost, dismissive avoidants tend to be quite insightful and intelligent. And a big part of the reason for this is because we all have these different facets of ourselves that have to do with connection. We've got our avoidance to connect physically, emotionally, and intellectually. And when we look at these different pillars of connection that exist, what you'll see is that dismissive avoidants often sort of suppress their ability to emotionally connect with others because they tend to be very afraid of their own emotions growing up. They're sort of conditioned to fear that aspect of themselves. And so we'll often see as a result of that is that they really hone in on that ability to intellectually connect. And there can be this really attractive quality about somebody who's very intelligent and well spoken and well thought out in their opinions, ideas, concepts. And dismissive avoidants quite often really enjoy having an intellectual debate or deep intellectual philosophical conversations, even. And so we'll see very often that this can be an original draw for a lot of other attachment styles to dismissive avoidance. Number 2, dismissive avoidants tend to have a really strong sense of independence. And I think for a lot of people, when we see somebody who's independent, that often exudes this sort of like subtle sense of strength and personal empowerment, like somebody can fend for themselves. And biologically, there are even components that tend to be attractive about people who are independent. And for a lot of individuals as well, we know through lots of other videos on this channel that people tend to be drawn into intermittent reinforcement. And while there can be some pain points and challenges around that and some elements of unhealthiness in regards to intermittent reinforcement, we will often see that when somebody is really independent, there can be that sort of intermittent reinforcement that's subtly there as a byproduct that sort of has this addictive quality in terms of what draws people in and gets people fixated on another person, especially for individuals who are more anxious leaning. So this is a huge trait that I hear often. Number 3, dismissive avoidants tend to have a sense of groundedness. And there's this sort of like groundedness and practicality. And I think for a lot of individuals from the outside looking in, especially when people are feeling overwhelmed or stressed in life, that groundedness really exudes another sort of subtle sense of strength that somebody sort of has everything under control. They're able to not panic in different situations. They're able to sort of be patient and allow things to play out. And there's sort of this practical approach to dealing with life that can be quite peaceful and calming to be around. And number 4, dismissive avoidance as a general rule, they don't seem to care what people think as much as some of the other attachment styles do. Now, even if they do on some level, because as we know from this channel, a lot of dismissive avoidance can be quite sensitive to criticism, even though they may never show it too much. Even if they do care, it's often much less than other attachment styles, and they're quick to sort of depersonalize other people's opinions and sort of move on. And so they'll sort of carve their own path a lot of the time, or go their own way, or not be afraid to try things that they have thought through and not necessarily subordinate to other people's opinions around them as much, though they may take them into consideration. So the vast majority of the time, because we know trait variety is such a draw for attraction, we know when people are expressing our repressed traits, that's one of the 3 major factors that creates attraction at a subconscious level. And there's a whole bunch of videos on this channel, if you haven't seen them already, that explain that. So one of the big things is if somebody is expressing traits or behaviors that you feel disempowered with in the relationship to yourself, we often are sort of attracted to pair bond with those traits. And what we'll see often here is because dismissive avoidants tend to express this sense of aloofness or not really caring too much about what other people think. For people who do care a lot about that or are fixated on that to a strong degree, that can be a really strong draw. That can be something that sort of really reels people in. Now, there can be good parts of that, absolutely. And there can be negative sides of that at the same time. You know, if somebody's not able to take somebody else into consideration, the vast majority of the time. By the way, if you are listening to this, and as you're hearing this part here, if you're thinking about how you might struggle with caring what other people think, or struggle with boundaries and people pleasing, we have a whole boundaries course you can check out for free for 7 days using the link in the description box below. And it actually goes through like understanding all of your relationship to boundaries, everything from like auditing your boundaries and really understanding them, and then going into some of the different dynamics in terms of how to recondition your relationship to boundaries so you're not afraid to set them, not afraid to express them. And if you go a level deeper, it will actually help you remove your fears around boundaries. And so some of those fears of like, what will happen if I set a boundary, or the fear of caring so much about what somebody thinks if you do set a boundary, or the idea that you could offend somebody or hurt a relationship. It will help you communicate in a healthy way that will mitigate that, and also remove these different subconscious fears we may not realize that we're carrying. Like, if I set a boundary, I'll be abandoned, and these ideas and stories we have that may not actually be a fully accurate depiction of the truth. So you can check that out for free using the link below for 7 days. And this brings me to trait number 5, which is that dismissive avoidants tend to have this sense of mystery. And I've had so many conversations with people over the years who have said things like, I really just want to crack this person open and understand them, and I want them to open up. And a lot of people, especially in the dating stage, tend to get drawn to that sort of sense of mystery. And at a deeper level for dismissive avoidance, I think a lot of that sense of mystery is actually just based on fear of being vulnerable and fear of opening up too much or too soon, or being seen too deeply too soon. And also a representation of them sometimes being out of relationship to the emotional aspects of self, especially before like doing any work on themselves, right? And so that mystery can be very interesting and intriguing, but it can also represent, it's not like dismissive avoidants are often intentionally and in a premeditated way trying to be mysterious, but there's just this element of them being out of relationship to that emotional part of themselves. So it seems as if they're really holding their cards close to their chest there. But I think what it actually represents much more is them just not really having a lot of time is spent in that area of life. So it feels hard to connect to them there because they aren't usually sitting there, if that makes sense. And so there can be that sort of mysteriousness that draws people in. And there's that element of, as a dismissive avoidant does feel more and more comfortable and more safe in relationships and develops that part of themselves more, that is on the path to secure how they may start opening up more and more often. So I hope this answers many of the questions that we keep getting. And please let me know any other comments you have below, or what traits you seem to find that have drawn you in to dismissive avoidance in the past. And if you enjoyed this video, please like it, share it, subscribe to our channel, and I will see you in future videos.